Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Opening day. There's nothing quite like it in sports. The first day of the season where you have high optimism that this could be your year. And then it quickly comes crashing down. You realize that maybe your quarterback wasn't as good as you thought he was. You realize that the player you hoped was going to make a big leap isn't going to progress at all. And in the case of the Chicago Bears, you realize that your head coach is an idiot. September 16, 1973. It's the Dallas Cowboys traveling up north to the Windy City to take on the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. Dallas is one of the best teams in football. They've made the postseason in 7 straight years, including 2 Super Bowl appearances, and a win at Super Bowl VI 2 seasons before. As for the Bears, they had a crisis on their hands after George Halas retired following the 1967 season. Halas is one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. The 6-time champion coached over 40 years, and the Bears were consistently good under his reign. But after he retired, things went south quickly. Jim Dooley was his successor. He never finished above 500 in his 4 seasons with the team, even going 1-13 in 1969. That made Abe Gibron the head coach in 1972. He went 4-9-1 in his first season, finishing dead last in the NFC Central. But it's a new year. We've seen some crazy turnarounds before. Heck, some Bears fans at the time might remember going 3-7 in 1945 and then winning the NFL championship the following year in 1946. And if you can beat the Dallas Cowboys on opening day, especially a Cowboys team led by Roger Staubach, then that goes a long, long way to giving Bears fans some hope for the first time since the days of Papa Bear. The game plays out like many expected in the first half. Dallas jumps out to a 17-3 lead thanks to 2 touchdown passes by Staubach, who was starting his first game since separating his shoulder in the 1972 preseason. At that point in his career, including the postseason, Staubach was 16-1 as the starting quarterback of the Cowboys, and it was looking like that record was going to improve here. But then the Bears came back. Ike Hill returned a punt 59 yards for a touchdown to make it a 17-10 game. Not a bad way to make your debut with the team. And then Carl Garrett, also making his Chicago debut, scored from 15 yards out to tie the game. Considering the talent gap between the 2 teams, and the fact that the Cowboys had won 8 straight opening day games up until this point, this could be a huge game for the Bears if they could pull out a result. It's still tied with about 5 minutes to go. Note that there's no broadcast footage of the game available, and back in 1973, they didn't have a running clock on the screen. Heck, NBC was showing games in 1997 that didn't even have a running game clock. The video says there were 6 minutes left, but the Associated Press says there were 4 minutes left, so I'm just going to split the difference and say about 5 minutes left in the game. Chicago is forced to punt on their own 29-yard line. Just pin the Cowboys deep, and with the way your defense is playing, you've got a shot at doing this. Still plenty of time to get the ball back, or even force a turnover and get good field position. Just don't screw this up and you'll be fine. Guess what happens next?
The Bears gambled on 4th and 1 and lost. The fake punt did not fool Dallas rookie Billy Joe Dupree, number 89. Dupree's play was converted into a Tony Frisch field goal, and Dallas won 20-17.
Welcome to Dumb Decisions. Before I break this play down, this whole series is about taking an in-depth look at decisions made during games that were clearly awful from the start. This isn't something that looked bad in hindsight. Rather, this is something that looked awful almost immediately. These are moves where your gut instinct tells you right away that there is no way this can possibly work. And sure enough, your gut instinct was smarter than that of an NFL head coach. And for this one, we are taking a look at the mind of Abe Gibron. We've looked at lots of coaches on this segment, and outside of Gus Bradley, this is probably the worst of the bunch. In his 3 seasons with the Bears, Gibron went 11-30-1, doing next to nothing productive, and finishing with 4 or fewer wins in each of his 3 seasons with the team. When you lose 30 out of 42 games, you're probably going to make some awful decisions along the way. And this might be the worst of the bunch. So with that being said, let's take a look at why calling a fake punt on your own 29-yard line in a tie game with 5 minutes left is a horrible idea. The first thing I always like to do in these situations is evaluate them from a risk-reward standpoint. Let's look at the risk and reward of calling this fake punt. If you get it, the reward is that you get a new set of downs. Obviously, that's really good. The goal of the game is to pick up first downs until you find your way into the end zone. But here's the problem with that. let's say the Bears get the first down here. If you need a field goal to take the lead and possibly win the game, you've got to make it a 39-yard field goal to give yourself a realistic shot at winning, considering the fact that in 1972, your kicker, Mac Percival, went 1 for 10 from 40 yards and beyond. That means that, considering the goalposts were on the goal line back then and not moved back, you need to get to the 32-yard line. So if you get this first down, you've still got to go about 40 more yards just to give yourself a chance at winning. And this might be doable if the offense was any good that day. Chicago finished the game with 30 net passing yards. They had 6 turnovers. They put the ball on the ground 6 times. They scored 1 offensive touchdown the entire game, as the other came off of a punt return. The odds that Chicago would be able to drive down the field 40 more yards after getting this first down were slim. The reward here isn't that great when you look at it from a deeper context. With that, we compare that to the risk, which is the Cowboys getting the ball and being in field goal range immediately, essentially winning the game right then and there. And what makes no sense about this is the fact that if you're Chicago, your defense was playing really well. The Cowboys did not score in the second half up until that point. Roger Staubach did next to nothing in that half. You forced 3 turnovers. You forced Dallas to put the ball on the ground an additional 2 times. If you punt the ball away, all indications are that you're going to get a stop and get the ball back. At the very least, with the way the Cowboys were playing in the second half, it's unlikely that you're going to allow Dallas to drive the length of the field. Now that you've called this fake punt and failed, however, you not only give the Cowboys great field position, but barring a turnover or a penalty or something along those lines, your defense, which has been playing well the entire half, is hopeless. But as things stand, you might be wondering why I called this the most boneheaded fake punt in NFL history. Yes, the decision was awful, but there's no way that it's one of the worst fake punts in NFL history, right? Well, here's another piece of evidence that I have not mentioned that just adds to the stupidity and makes it belong in the Hall of Infamy. Because you see, the Bears ran the exact same fake punt earlier in the game. They ran it in the first quarter and they got 4 yards out of it. Call that play once and it might throw some people off. But to call that same fake punt twice in one game against the best coach in football in Tom Landry, you've got to be a special kind of stupid to think you can pull one past Tom Landry twice. How'd that saying go again?
What's that old expression? Fool me once, shame on me, but fool me twice, fiddle-dee-dee.
Naturally, we have to figure out why Gibron called this fake punt. Knowing that the risk was the possibility of losing the game, and knowing that Dallas was ready for it since they just ran it with the same player not even 2 hours before. And to be fair, Gibron owned the decision, saying that he called it and that he did it because he didn't want the game to end in a tie. Also, in fairness, remember that in 1973, there was no regular season overtime. The 1973 season was the last time that games that ended in ties after regulation were ties. Sudden death overtime would not come into effect until the 1974 season. But there are flaws with Gibron's logic here. Mainly, there was still plenty of time to get the ball back. There were still, give or take, 5 minutes left in the game. With the way your defense was playing, there's no reason why you couldn't get the ball back. It wasn't as if you had no shot at winning with the punt. There was still ample opportunity, and the odds might have even been in your favor. And some might compare this to Frank Reich's decision to go for it in overtime against the Texans in 2018, and in fact, that might have been the first thing to pop into your head. But there's 3 things with that. Number 1, there were 27 seconds left in that game. If the Colts punted, they were definitely going to tie. There weren't 5 minutes left like they were in this game. Number 2, the Colts had a solid offense. Indy scored 34 points that day. They had shown a propensity to move the ball on Houston. It wasn't like Chicago, where their offense was stagnant for the entire game. And number 3, the Colts were near midfield. Even if the Colts didn't get the first here, there was still a chance that their defense would be able to make a stop and keep Houston out of reasonable field goal range. They weren't pinned at their own 29-yard line like the Bears were. As Tom Landry said later on, I expect he expected we weren't expecting it. Sure enough, as evidenced by the fact that the Cowboys won this game 20-17, the Bears messed up big time here. So what do we learn from all this? Don't call a fake punt in your own territory with 5 minutes left if your main concern is you won't be able to get the ball back. If your defense is playing well, then continue to trust your defense. Sometimes, a tie isn't the end of the world, especially if it's against arguably the best team in football. And most importantly, Don't call the same fake punt twice in one game against one of the greatest coaches and teams to ever do it. Because when all these elements are in play, you can't exactly be surprised when this play backfires. Talk about a dumb decision. Be sure to like this video and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL history on YouTube. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.